what did you see?
It was a cell. There really wasn't much in it. There was a bed. There was like this little desk on the side, a toilet, and some like a place to drink water out of, and that's it. There was nothing else.
Yeah. So what was it like?
Just a bunch of like a white wall with bricks and a bunch of writing on it. It was really bare. It was kind of gross. It wasn't clean. It was really dirty actually, and it wasn't pleasant. Didn't look comfortable. Didn't look homey.
And you think that solitary confinement is a viable option as punishment?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you a story of a boy named Ian. He was put into solitary confinement for 18 years. And this is because he shot a woman while trying to rob her with his friends. This woman didn't die and even requested for Ian to have a shorter prison time. And he became a cutter in uninterrupted solitary confinement and could only have one phone call a month. And this kid was like, he was just like very young, like our age. And do you think that's justified?
I don't think he should have had that punishment. I think, personally, I think solitary confinement should be a punishment for crimes that go above and beyond, or for things that in no way, not having too many pencils as I saw on the wall, not for having sex in your jail cell, none of that. For things that are just horrible things to do. Because I do think that punishment, some people deserve that type of punishment. Like, there are crimes that just are not okay to commit. And that story that was just told to me was not one of them.
There's some people, such as a woman named Angela Davis, who think about abolishing prison systems altogether. And she thinks that prisons are like taken for granted and instead of questioning whether they're actual like useful facilities. So would you be opposed to the idea of abolishing all prisons?
Yes.
Yes? Even if there were like other alternatives, you think that prisons should be in place to, for what reasons?
Are you saying other alternatives in terms of like house arrest?
Yeah, house arrest, like rehabilitation places instead. Like, what do you think? Or do you think like some people just deserve to be in prison altogether?
I think there are too many people in prison right now for crimes that do not warrant prison, for crimes that are not to the extent of like going to prison. So I think in that sense, I think there are other alternatives for people who have committed crimes that need to deal with the punishment of that. But I don't think abolishing prisons overall is a good idea, just because people need to be held responsible for their actions.
Okay. And my last question is, what's your definition of justice?
Definition of justice. I think justice is getting what you deserve, I think, in a way, but in a way that's fair to everyone.
Wait, this room it feels so much bigger than when I walked in. Shit. Wait.
Alright,
Bro,
one
that's
second.
wild.
Let me just stop there. Alright, stream record. Now I'm going to just ask you a couple questions. You can take a seat, whatever feels cool. Alright, 1 second. Alright, cool. Alright, so first I want to just ask you, how was that experience and just what you saw, what it was like?
It was, I don't know, I feel like when I first decided to do this, I didn't expect to be that I didn't expect it to be that cool or anything. Like I've tried VR before and it was kind of like that roller coaster type stuff. But I don't know, at one point for this, I was scared to get up and walk around because it really felt like I was in that cell and bro. So yeah, I saw the solitary confinement cell and there's the door was right there. And I think it's kind of weird because that's where the door was in real life. There was the toilet over there and the bed and the little seat thingy. Yeah.
Cool. Do you think that solitary confinement is a viable option as punishment?
No, I don't think so. Even though 9 minutes, I could already just like it felt really different when they were like talking about the dreams and stuff, and the part where you're like floating. Oh, that was so trippy. It's like if that's 9 minutes in solitary confinement, then like years must be like crazy. Like it just must really mess a person out like that.
All right. I'm going to tell you a story about a boy named Ian. He was in solitary confinement for 18 years. This was because he shot a woman while trying to rob her with his friends. And this woman didn't die and even requested for Ian to have a shorter prison time later. And he became like a cutter in uninterrupted solitary confinement and only had one phone call a month. So do you think that that's justified at all?
No, it's totally not. Like, okay, first of all, the woman wasn't dead. Like, it's different if she like was actually dead. And she herself thought that like his sentence shouldn't have been that long. And like one phone call a month, like uninterrupted, like what the hell? I feel like as a person you just need to like be around other people and like see and like talk to things other than like the white walls around you. That's crazy.
There's some people, such as a woman named Angela Davis, who would like to like abolish prisons altogether, and she thinks that the prison system's taken for granted instead of people like questioning their methods and if they're actually useful. So, do you think would you be opposed to this idea
Of like
abolishing prisons?
I mean, I feel like if there's like another like better option, then for sure, yeah. Like something that wouldn't like mess prisoners up that way and would like actually like give them a like better chance like rehabilitating, like getting prepared to like re-enter society after like committing a crime like that.
Mm-hmm. And my last question is, what is your definition of justice?
Interesting. I feel like justice for if you're like trying to get justice for something, it's like getting to a point where everything's like fair and like equal in life, like and like everyone's like on the same level, like everyone's like happy, or like it doesn't have to be like a compromise or something, like everyone feels like it's right, like whatever is going on. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no
All
problem.
right, hold on. All right, I'm just gonna ask you a couple questions and we'll be good. So my first question for you is, so what happened? How'd you feel? What was that experience like?
Honestly, it was like immersive, but it was like very scary. Like just being in that small room and like seeing everything that could go on. Just like very terrifying.
Yeah, all right. I'm gonna tell you the story of a boy named Ian. Ian was like our age, and he spent 18 years in solitary confinement. He was put there because he shot a woman while he was trying to rob, he shot a woman while he was robbing her with his friends, and this woman didn't die, and even requested for Ian to have a shorter prison time later. He became a cutter in interrupted solitary confinement and only had one phone call a month. So, do you think this is justified, and does this change your thoughts in any way?
No, I don't think solitary confinement is justifiable because I feel like as humans we all make mistakes, and like with mistakes come consequences, but like consequences like solitary confinement don't have a role to help anybody. They just sort of like they just worsen the problem because psychologically nobody knows what he could have been going through when he did that action. But after solitary confinement, like even with the cutting, now you can see that he's like broken.
There's some people, such as a woman named Angela Davis, who even would like to abolish prisons altogether. She thinks that prisons are like taken for granted instead of being questioned for their methods and questioned if it's actually like useful facilities. Would you be opposed to the idea of abolishing all prisons if there were alternatives?
I would be opposed because I feel like the prison system itself isn't a bad idea. It's just the running of prison systems is what's the problem. Like the leadership behind it, because if they were to, because prison is like a way to sort of reform your actions, and that's like what's supposed to happen. But like, if you're just punishing them in unjust ways to try to like break them, I don't think that's necessarily necessary. So like, you shouldn't abolish prisons, but you should try to like fix them, if that makes sense.
Yep. And my last question for you is, what is your definition of justice?
I would say it depends. Justice literally means like, if you're done, if you do something wrong or somebody does something wrong to you, that justice is that you get like rightfully like back at them or like something like that. But I feel like it should more be like, you made a mistake, you have to pay for that mistake. But that doesn't mean you need to suffer for it. That's justice.
Yeah. Thank you.
No problem.
There we go. All right, that was cool.
So I'm gonna ask you a couple of questions.
So you just
Pretty
this.
sure. Screen recording is off. All right. So my first question is gonna be, so what did you see? What was it like in there?
It was pretty creepy. Yeah, it was pretty creepy. Just the way it depicted like the prisoner going insane, and yeah, it was pretty boring. Definitely could see how that could, even 5 minutes was pretty boring compared to like a couple years or months. So
Do you think that solitary confinement is a viable option as punishment?
yeah, I do. Yeah, you want me to explain why or just?
Sure.
Yeah, I think while I'm not a fan of like longer, I definitely realize the psychological damage that it can cause for like in long periods of time. I do think that it's hard for prisons to come up with other forms of punishment that aren't like physical, and that are expensive and stuff like that. So I think for shorter periods of time, I do think it is a viable option for like gang activity and stuff and violence and stuff related to that.
All right. I'm going to tell you a story about a boy named Ian who was in solitary confinement for 18 years. This was because he shot a woman while trying to rob her with his friends, and the woman didn't even die and requested for Ian to have a shorter prison time. He became a cutter in uninterrupted solitary confinement and could use one phone call a month. Do you think that that's justified, and does that change anything?
Oh no, not at all. That definitely sounds unjust. I really don't think that people should be in solitary over a week. Like that's just brutal, especially for a much more minor offense, or not even a minor offense, but there's plenty of things in like the penal code that are much worse than that, like rape and actual like planned murder and stuff. So I think, especially if you made him sound like he was a kid.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous. So yeah.
There are some people, such as a woman named Angela Davis, who thought about even abolishing prisons altogether, and she thinks that people are taking prisons for granted instead of questioning their methods and whether they're actual useful facilities. Would you be opposed to this idea if there were
As to abolishing prisons?
Yep.
I would be against abolishing prisons. I think that her whole idea that we're taking them for granted is her taking them for granted, because there's a lot of, because I just think there has to be consequences, and there's a lot of these people that you don't want on the streets. So, yeah.
Cool. And my last question is, what is your definition of justice?
My definition of justice is that when people perform an action, they are judged by their peers and receive a sentence from their peers.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Alright, I'm gonna just Really quick. Alright. Sorry about this. Did not know that would happen. I'm just gonna ask you some questions. If you could just answer them.
Do I look at the camera or do I look at you?
I'll be near the camera so you can just look at both. You know. So first I want to ask you what you saw and like what was it like in there.
So I saw a really small cell that was covered in brick walls and stone floors. There was a bed and a small table and a toilet, sink.
And do you think that solitary confinement is a viable option as punishment?
I do not think it is a viable option for punishment because not only is it ineffective because it usually drives people to more violence, it's also discriminatory and expensive and just like not ethical in any way.
I'm going to tell you a story of a boy named Ian who was put into solitary confinement for 18 years. He shot a woman while trying to rob her with his friends, and the woman didn't die and even requested for Ian to have a shorter prison time later. He became a cutter in uninterrupted solitary confinement and could use only one phone call a month. Do you think that this is justified? And does that change your opinion on anything?
I don't think it's ever justified to put someone in solitary confinement for an extended period of time, especially because it's torture, quite literally, and it drives people to mental insanity or mental illness that I think is just inhumane.
And there are some people, such as a woman named Angela Davis, who want to abolish prisons altogether. She thinks that prisons are taken for granted instead of being questioned for whether they are actually useful and are healthy. And would you be opposed to this idea if there were alternatives?
I think that's a really interesting question, but I think there are a lot of parts to it. I do think that the prison system is. I have to swear.
What?
I have to swear.
Yeah.
I do think the prison system is a little fucked, and it's very discriminatory and it's kind of awful. But at the moment, I don't know if we have any other like viable alternatives to prison. So although I think it's a good idea, I don't think it's reasonable in our current days.
And my final question for you is, what is your definition of justice?
I think this might take me a while.
Of course.
Am I allowed to say that?
Yeah.
I have no idea.
All right. Thank you. But my first question is, what did you see and what was it like?
Very small white cell. Seemed a lot like the sensory deprivation techniques. Like I read a lot about. I read a lot about advanced interrogation techniques, and one of the big things of that is sensory deprivation. It's like make everything white, and I noticed a bit of that there, so I thought that was interesting. It's just a really small room that's very bleak. Not much that you can control or change.
Yeah. And do you think that solitary confinement is a viable option as punishment?
Yes.
Yes. Can you
Elaborate on that. Yeah.
Yep.
I think that certainly some people are too dangerous or they exhibit dangerous characteristics, and isolating them from the outside world is, that's already the point of prison. I think isolating them from prison yards and other prisoners just furthers that experience. In that situation, though, it becomes a matter of not rehabilitation, but just protection of the public from, arguably, somebody who's a danger to the public. So some people are just too dangerous to be outside of solitary confinements, and as a punishment, I think it's, it can be very effective.
Mm.
People don't want to be alone.
I'm going to tell you a story of a boy named Ian who was put into solitary confinement for 18 years. He shot a woman while trying to rob her with his friends, and this woman didn't die and even requested for Ian to have a shorter prison time later. He became a cutter in uninterrupted solitary confinement and could use one phone call a month. So, is that justified? Does that change your thoughts on anything?
Was he put directly into solitary confinement, or was he was put directly into solitary confinement?
Yeah.
I think solitary confinement should not be the first resort. I think it should be. I think that considering the circumstances of the crime, that may have been a slight overreaction, but I still think that it was. I think that it was an overreaction, but not out of the question as a sentencing.
And there are some people, such as Angela Davis, who would like to abolish prisons altogether. She thinks that prisons are taken for granted instead of being questioned for whether they're actually useful and are helping people. Would you be opposed to this idea if there were alternatives?
If there are alternatives, like there'd have to be some pretty good alternatives. Some people need to be removed from society. If you're going to exile them, then it becomes a different. Then it becomes, if you wanted to exile a criminal from the U.S., then they become a different country's problem. And instead of having a shot at getting out, they stop being a citizen altogether, and that arguably is much worse. When it comes to rehabilitation and things like that for non-violent criminals who are caught on drug charges, which makes up a huge portion of the prison population, I think that absolutely rehabilitation is something that we need to look at a lot more into, and drug charges need to be decriminalized. But if you rape, if you kill, if you steal, you need to be removed from the population, and we don't have an alternative for you yet. So once you find one, sure, let me know.
And my last question for you is, what is your definition of justice?
My definition of justice?
Yep.
If you are wrong, if you are wronged, the person who has done that wrongdoing is punished. Within reason, with the proper means, and pretty much proportionality is a big part of that. But if someone is hurt, if someone is wronged, then yeah, the person who does that wrongdoing gets punished, and the person who and if somebody does something that is good, they get their due. They should be rewarded for it.
All right, cool. Thank you. That's all. All right. So, yep, we're here. I'm gonna explain it to you guys. So, we're here with. All right, can we say everybody's names?
What's up? I'm Nick.
I'm Summer.
Hunter.
Yolana.
Jada.
Lauren.
All right, Claude, can you move in a little bit? Get a little closer to your group. So we're gonna be discussing solitary confinement today, and what I'm gonna be doing is reading statements out loud, and if you agree, you're gonna come and sit on these stools right here, and then you'll discuss, and then after about 3 minutes, I'll bring in everybody to discuss the statement, and then everybody goes back to their seats, and then I'll read another statement.
And if you disagree?
Disagree, I'll call you guys back up.
Will we talk with the agrees?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Yep.
We're gonna talk after
Yes,
the
sir.
Okay.
And this side right here on the left is the disagree with solitary confinement, and the right side is agree. All right. So, my first statement is solitary confinement is dangerous for prisoners' mental health.
This is agree and this is disagree?
Well,
Don't go anywhere.
if you agree with that statement, you come up here. Oh, everybody's coming.
So basically,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Should we talk about why we agree with that?
Yeah, I'm just gonna take a seat.
I mean, I think I definitely agree with that statement because you're not interacting with other people. You don't have much to do. So that can really mess people up. I mean, not being outside. But that's also part of being in prison.
yeah.
So I researched this sort of project a while back, and I think it's over a third of prisoners in solitary confinement have mental illnesses, and when they're in solitary confinement, it either increases or develops. So, and there's also a very high suicide rate where people have been reported to try to bite out their own veins, or just repeatedly smash their head into the wall until they bleed out. Because it's and they're, even from a scientific perspective, over and over, there have been so many studies that have proven it causes psychosis and so many depression and so many other terrible mental illnesses. So I just don't know why you would disagree, because it's
It's a fact.
I think it's hard to disagree.
Yeah, I feel like over long periods of time, it definitely can wear on people's mental stability and then make it harder for them to rehabilitate into society and get a normal job after.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like solitary, it's a serious punishment and it comes with serious consequences.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. Just go back to your seats.
This is a lot of moving.
Yeah, that's what
I'm gonna stay here.
Good job.
I want to stay here.
It'll be a different question probably, but
Are those your binoculars?
nope.
Okay, let's keep going.
All right. Yep. Get in. Just get it. Make sure you're in the camera. All right.
Can you see me?
Yep. Dangerous criminals in jail should be in solitary confinement.
What do you mean by dangerous?
Yeah,
If they're dangerous to inside the prison.
I have a very
what that is.
Like two others.
view on it. I believe
Well, you want to sit down or?
no, it's okay, wait.
All right,
If
then-
we're in the middle, should we go to yes?
well, you decide for yourself. You're gonna discuss after, anyways.
Dangerous, you mean would
I have a very
Would hurt others.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
I thought everybody's got their assigned seats over here.
Yeah, I think there's a wide variety of good.
Yep. Hold up.
I think there's a wide variety of criminals in prisons, and mixed with the wide age range, it can be very easy for certain people to gain power over others and recruit them to gangs. Per se, if they're a predator, there's kids who are young, who can be technically younger than 18 in prisons that don't have rules for minors. So that's super dangerous if there's predators just in the prison population. And yeah, furthermore, just gang activity. There's really no other punishment for these people because they're already in prison, and you certainly can't inflict physical harm on them. So there's no other punishment for these prisoners. So yeah, I think definitely solitary is an option for short periods of time.
If you are a threat, you were put in prison because you were a threat or you did some sort of wrongdoing outside of it during your civilian life outside of prison, and then you were put in prison because that removes you from the population. And then if you are still dangerous and a threat in that population, it still makes sense to remove you. By that very same logic, it makes sense to remove you from that population. And if you are going, I think that it's a matter of whether you inflict harm upon others or upon yourself, and that's a hard choice to make, but. At the same time, it's an easy choice to make.
I'd go as far to say even not following the rules, just for that would result in a smaller amount of time in solitary, because there's really, I think it's just there's no other feasible punishment for people who have an infraction or don't follow essentially the code of conduct in prison. Is really the only way that guards can retain their powers by putting them in solitary and enforcing some sort of punishment.
And I think if someone has been dangerous in the past, in the sense that they have committed another crime while in prison, that,
Yes.
yeah,
That warrants it.
yeah.
All right, Jade, you can join in the conversation.
Do I have to move
Yeah,
over there?
yeah.
What's
Well, I
the point
mean-
of me moving to
Just
this
turn the
side?
camera.
Just
But then she's not.
Yeah, because I want to get all you guys your reactions.
I'm gonna have so much fun editing this. It's gonna take you 9 years.
No, it'll be easy. I like playing.
Just play the whole video.
Which way do I face?
Yep. You FaceTime. FaceTime.
Okay. So the reason I was over there was because I'm kind of more in the middle about it, but because I don't think people should stay in solitary. I think solitary confinement works as a punishment, but I don't think it should be extended for over 15 days. And right now, a lot of people in solitary confinement stay there for the longest has been 45 years or something like that. I don't know, 40 or 45 years, and I think that's just inhumane. Because following what the UN decided in late 1900s, they decided that over 15 days would be cruel. Is it cruel and unusual?
It's like torture, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think also, so I think 15 days at max. And I think another reason why there's a problem with just like putting people who are dangerous in solitary confinement, especially when is like dangerous can, especially when it's like unchecked in a space such as a prison where there's such a power imbalance, it can be used to define very different things. For example, a lot of women who come forward about being sexually assaulted by guards are considered dangerous for like lying and put in solitary confinement for that. A lot of people who are considered dangerous for just being political activists are put into solitary confinement immediately because of that. And so like a lot of people have been put in solitary confinement for like spitting at a guard or a lot of other things like that, which I just think is not necessarily like a good determiner. And also when we say dangerous, and like especially because like you, Hunter, brought up about gang related things a lot, and gangs are a huge problem in prison, but that can cause a lot of racial profiling, especially in solitary confinement.
You're going to stay in here. I'm just going to lock it.
Okay,
got it.
cool.
Bloopers.
Why would you put bloopers in a school video?
I've done it before, it's fun. Continue.
Yeah. So there's a lot of racial profiling, especially in prisons, because prisons have such a high population percentage of people of color, and if you look at solitary confinement, the like rates of people of color are so much higher than like the percentage of the population as a whole.
Yeah, I just out of curiosity, do you have any other like, so for example, you brought up spitting at a guard, like a minor offense like that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any, like obviously you understand like why prisoners can't be doing that because it essentially puts them like kind of above the law to the other prisoners. But do you have any other like alternatives to solitary confinement for prison, like for punishment?
I do. For example, something like a minor offense like that, you could just take away their hour in like the yard for like a day, or maybe like not like just like minor things in a prison, like making them do more chores or making them help out more around the prison, just as like a lighter punishment. Because I just don't think a spitting at a guard is like warrants
I don't know.
such a severe punishment.
I don't know if having them. I think of those putting them on lockdown, you know, in their cell alone, which is essentially equivalent to solitary confinement to a degree, except you know without the extended period of time, is the best option there because taking away an hour of guard time, you know, it's hard to manage, and the only other thing you can do is put them in their cell for that hour. But having them do chores is it's not that large of a punishment when you consider it's prison and there's nothing else to do.
Furthermore, how do you make sure they like are doing the chores? They're essentially they're in prison, like they most likely have very little respect for authority, and if you're making them help out, I feel like they'd be kind of like.
See, I feel like you're making a pretty large generalization about people who have been in prison, because there's a large population of people who are just like they're on, for example, just like a mistake they made when they were younger, or like there's like you have to think about them as people, like. They probably do have respect for authority. Sure, there are definitely people who don't have respect for authority in prison, but I think there are just as many who do.
Yeah, that's fair if someone gets in on like a crime a long time ago, but the whole point is while they were like up to this point, they just committed another like offense. So obviously like they haven't changed as much, or because it's like just now.
It's not even necessarily changing as much. Like if we go back to like a lot of people, like we've seen on the news, I'm sure people can get like up to 5 years for what? Selling weed on the street.
Yeah.
And that's like, that seems extreme to me. And so being like punished and just like saying that they have absolutely no respect for authority, I think just seems a little unfair.
Well, yeah, but you were talking about they just committed an offense while in prison.
Yeah.
Oh, while in prison.
Yeah.
It's like how do you punish somebody?
But then
once they've
also there's
already
the idea,
punished?
the other reason why I think it's like we can't just automatically assume that it was something like dangerous is because there's a lot of like corruption in prisons, and there's a lot of like problems with authority figures in prison. So like one of the most common, like a really common reason why women are put in solitary confinement is because they complain or report sexual assault. Which
The most common?
no, not the
It's
most
a very
common,
common.
but a pretty common one.
Well, I think like our definitions of dangerous are all
Different.
relative. It's relative
Yeah.
in a sense.
Yeah.
So I think the question is really hard to answer because
Yeah.
When I think dangerous, I think killing somebody. I think
Physical.
physical
I think,
danger.
Yeah, I'd say physical danger.
So like, and the people in prison might have a different view of what danger is.
Yeah.
So that's like,
So like, why would you classify like spitting on a guard dangerous in a sense?
It's disrespectful.
I think to Hunter's point, I don't know. I think it's dangerous to the power structure because I think if you think about it in like terms of gangs, if you are the head of a gang and someone who's below you shows you little to no respect, it's kind of in your job to put them in their place in order to have everybody else follow you. If you don't put others in your place who are below you, in a sense, they feel that they can overthrow you. They feel they're gaining more power.
See what you're saying? This is a very weird analogy.
It was a terrible analogy.
It's a bad way to
No, I
phrase
know what you're saying. I know what you're
understand your
saying.
point.
I
It's an
just-
unintentional power dynamic that is that is there for a positive reason to keep these people in line and to keep everyone else safe. And so when people challenge the power dynamic that's keeping everyone safe, there does have to be like repercussions for that because it's just setting the precedent for.
But should
If
solitary
you-
I
don't think it should
confinement
be-
be that
Like, the first
punishment?
option.
Is there the question
For a
is like,
small
is there an
amount of time.
alternative?
Yeah,
For a
I-
small amount of time.
Okay, how
I
do you
think for
define
like I
I'd
think
say 15 days.
Yeah.
It's UN. It's part of UN human.
no.
In no way should you be in solitary confinement for
For
15
spitting.
days for spitting on
Hold
others.
on.
Yeah, no.
Oh,
For spitting on an officer.
I definitely
Well, the
agree. It should
punishment
not be
should be
about
correct,
15
but it has
days.
to be.
I'm yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
my bad. I interrupted you, but the amount of mental like damage that is inflicted even at 15 days, I think over a week is for an infraction is bad. But I do think that at the same time, I think that like repeat major offenders like sexual predators or just like repeated like gang violence, I think they should be kept isolated because there's no reason to keep them in the main prison like population.
Yeah. But when that happens, there is also
Yeah.
the alternative of transferring them to different prison structures, increasing their sentence, and putting them, normal security versus maximum security prisons, that sort of thing.
Yeah, but they're still in the prison population.
Yeah.
But the difference between like a standard prison versus the federal maximum security prison is immense. Like, essentially, if you're in a federal maximum security prison, you are more or less in solitary confinement the entire time. You have very little human contact, but if human contact you do have is controlled.
Not if you're in a federal prison.
Federal, like maximum security, yeah.
No, it's not. There's a normal prison population.
There are, but there are also some that are pretty,
Oh yeah. No,
Yeah.
I mean, no, solitary.
All right. New statement?
Yes.
All right.
Please delete my analogy. That made no sense. Like,
Bro, you pretty much like the way you phrased it made me think of a dog getting put down.
Whoa.
no, damn.
I like it. Speaking of a bad analogy, like
That was a terrible analogy. I'm sorry, guys. Like, that's like if you go into your classroom and one person will do the homework, and the teacher's like, oh, whatever. The rest of the class might start not doing the homework.
This is just
Okay.
bad.
We're just gonna
Okay,
move on to
so
this
no.
topic.
New statement.
We don't know what
Alright.
to say, just move on.
All right. My next statement is solitary confinement is has to do with race, gender, and religion.
Has
What-
to
All of them
wait,
were
what does has to do?
Yeah, it has to do with the
Yeah, is it like
Like
it's an important part of solitary confinement, or is it can be a factor?
it could be like it's a factor.
Is it
could be
is a factor? Or it
Can be a factor. Can be a factor.
Okay.
I mean, is this like systemically?
Yeah, systemically.
Yeah. Okay.
It is, yeah.
All right.
Why do we agree, guys?
Yeah. Okay, so like Jane was talking about how some women are put into the solitary confinement cells just for like saying that they were harassed or like raped by one of the officers, and there's like part of that power dynamic is like just women like considered to like be weaker, like they're not really going to believe her. It's just like, oh, she's just like trying to like get out of this punishment or whatever, and so she's more likely to just be thrown into a cell. But it's also very likely that being raped is a possibility for these women, just because of like the way that the prison system works. Like there's all these like dark hallways, and it's so easy for one of the correctional officers to just like go and do whatever he wants with her. And so I feel like it's just easy for her to just be thrown in there, being a woman, versus like a male doing like I don't know if he would like make the same claim, but I feel like it might even be a bit harder for him to do something of the same level and get that punishment.
I think, sorry.
Wait, I have a question. Was sexuality part of the
Yep,
question?
it was.
Okay.
Okay. I was gonna say, I think that just based on the implicit facts that there's systemic biases based on sexuality, race, religion, etc. in our justice system. By relation, there are going to be similar correlations in our prison system. So the similar effects to what you see in our justice system in terms of incarceration rates, conviction rates, that sort of thing, and you're going to see similar rates in the punishment rates in our prisons.
Also, moving on, adding on to that, there's also the idea of sexuality. So it's been proven, and it's like an excuse that a lot of people have to put certain prisoners in solitary confinement because they are gay or because they identify on the queer scale, because of for their own protection, even if they aren't actually doing anything or if they haven't done anything. Like a lot of times, people are just put in there because they're just gonna think other people are gonna assault them or something like that, which is I just think is a strange idea. Like I can see where it comes from, but like
It comes from a genuine place, but the results
It's
don't.
misconstrued. It's misconstrued.
so. There's a lot of reports which are like there's a lot of like sometimes when a woman seems to, for example, I'm just saying woman. When a woman seems to like butch, do you know what butch is?
Like
Explain.
masculine.
Yeah,
Sort
which
of,
is not
sort
the
of.
right term, but masculine's right. Like if a woman seems too masculine, sometimes they're just like sent to solitary because they're seen as like a possible threat to other female like prisoners rather than like So I think sexuality plays a huge part. And what were the other factors?
Race,
Race.
gender.
Let me share some stats. African Americans represent about 14% of Americans, 38% of incarcerated prisoners, but about 60% of people held in solitary confinement.
African American males or African Americans?
Yeah, what
African Americans.
is
I feel like that's pretty straightforward.
What was the last one?
You want to go on?
Yeah.
60% of
So I'll talk about it.
yeah.
That's why.
Your flashlight is on.
Oops.
Is it? Thank you.
Battery.
I mean, I feel like.
So I think that, Tulio mentioned systemically, sorry, and I just really think, Nick brought up that there's higher levels of African Americans incarcerated, and that's not systematic at all, and there's not really systematic, because systematic is essentially rules and laws put in place by people in power that are gonna like hurt certain minorities or a certain class. However, there aren't any of those in the United States. You're pointing out freak incidents. Like, can you name a law that?
There's no laws, but the fact.
Wait.
No, actually,
No,
that's not
I'm
true.
really interested.
I mean, like, if
Hear
you
a
want
law.
there are incredibly different rates of policing, and people.
And do you know why that is? It's because there's higher crime.
So, the thing is, when you start
If
looking
there's
at
higher
if you
policing,
start looking at rates of reported crime versus
I'm just interested. Where can you name any systematic law
there's a
or rule
The-
put in place?
I don't think you know
That
what
would.
that word means.
No,
think you know.
systemic. Sorry, systemic.
No, not even okay.
that's
What
not
do you
a
guys-
question. You're okay either way.
Yeah, wait, what are you asking?
No, I just
Can you give me an example of systemic oppression in the United States currently in the current prison system?
Yes. So currently, in jury systems, there's a lot of qualifications that people are considered to be eligible to serve on jury. For example,
Is that in the prison system? In the prison system, what
well,
is
I
it?
think it's part of the prison system because it's part of what sends people to
Exactly.
prison.
Well, the
Yeah.
lawyers
So-
so the defending lawyer has to agree to the witnesses.
Yeah, but
Or,
it's
sorry,
almost
to
like
the
a,
jury,
it's almost
to the
like a
jury,
political
exactly.
play rather than it is. Yeah, so there's a lot of things that are input. For example, you can't have a lot of times you can't have tattoos, you can't have chains, you can't have like a certain type of hair. A lot of like things like that are qualifiers, which is like
A certain type. I think that's. I think that's.
The idea is like to identify effects.
Yeah, which that like kind of specifically target certain races, or like not certain races, like a certain group of people.
I know what you're trying to get across. I just think if the defendant and his lawyer get to approve the jury members, wouldn't they?
But I also
Wouldn't they
think you're
ensure
forgetting
that?
that a lot of people who are on trial don't have the money to get a really good lawyer, or don't have like.
Well, that's a pretty basic thing. If you're worried about being, that's assuming that there's the people on the jury are just randomly. If you put 7 people, that over half of them, or in cases of murder, rape, sexual assault, all of them are going to have some systemic bias towards you.
I think everyone has systemic bias.
Yeah.
Enough to incarcerate.
I think I have systemic bias. I think everyone in this room has systemic bias.
Enough to
Implicit
incarcerate
bias.
someone.
Yeah, that's what it really is.
Okay, I acknowledge that can be a thing, but you think you're just, without enough evidence, you're going to say, because that person is black, I think they're
In most cases,
In a lot of people,
this does happen.
if you look at,
It happens, but
if you look at
there's
the
that high of a.
But it happens
Yes.
more than like.
if you look at the
Imagine a white man was also sorry. It happens more than like if a white man is on the stand and the jury
Yeah.
just looks at them and they're like, oh, let's hear this man's story, instead of just they see a black man and they automatically like, because of this implicit bias, like assume that it's for the worse.
Yeah, but how is that systemic? How is there any laws or rules put in place that make the jury?
it's not necessarily
It
the
doesn't have to
laws.
be
It's
a-
not
yeah.
explicitly written in the laws either.
It's like just
I
decide.
think it's the
like,
people in power that are kind of like
That's literally it.
enforcing how we do things
Okay.
and how we.
Like the law stays pretty constant across the board. It's just where and when it's enforced and how heavily.
But we also can't think that it was that long ago.
Oh,
when Jim Crow and things like that. Where
That's
there were
definitely fair, but
actually
that's not
laws.
today.
But how long ago was that? You can't
That's
expect
like your
such a
grandma.
major.
That's like my grandma.
You
My
can't
grandma
expect
was
such a
alive.
major change
some of our
in the
parents.
minds
When were
of
Jim
people.
Crow laws?
60s.
60s. My mom was alive.
Give or
My
take
dad was
50
alive.
years.
Yeah.
Like our parents were.
So
That's
it's not.
And there was major reform since then.
I mean,
Not enough to
Reform.
erase their like history.
look. Okay, I'm just gonna read out some facts. Black drivers are 2.5 times more likely to have their cars searched during a traffic stop than white drivers. So in that of itself is more of them likely to get arrested just because their cars are being searched. So like for example, if 10 people are searched versus whether 5 people are searched, it's more likely that more people in the 10-person group is going to be.
How does that statistic get brought
Black
up?
juveniles are more than 4 times as likely as their white peers to be committed to detention facilities. People of color represent 2/3 of the life sentence population, whereas like white people make the majority of our population, like the U.S. population. Despite using and selling drugs at rates similar to those of their white counterparts, African American and Latinos, next people, comprise 62% of those in state prisons for drug offenses. In certain communities, the reincarceration rate for African Americans is 3 times higher than that of whites. Blacks of New York County and Manhattan received plea offers with jail time in 74% of felony cases, while whites received plea offers with jail time in only 51% of plea cases. And also, if we look at like the amount of people who are, I remember the statistic somewhere. I don't have it with me right now, but I do know that like if we look at how many people are accused of homicide or murder, we have a much higher population. We have a much higher percentage of white people being accused of it, but there's like a higher percentage of African Americans or other people of color being actually convicted.
Well, actually, considering that 56% of homicides are committed by people of color, that doesn't really add up. Considering, so if you're accused but acquitted, that doesn't mean that you did it. But if you're accused and convicted, sure, there's that small fringe majority, but I'm sorry.
Minority.
Yeah, fringe minority.
Yeah.
Sorry, that didn't do it. But how is that systematic? So we're just gonna acquit white people? Like that's just
Okay, what does systematic mean to you?
systemic. Sorry.
What does it mean to you?
Systemic is laws or rules / regulations put in place by people in power, aka the government, that oppress certain
Here's another
groups of
study
people.
for you. Black people are 7 times more likely than white people to be wrongly convicted of murder. So that's something to think about. The 56%, or what is it? I don't know what percent you said. But that
56%.
percent, out of those people, they're 7 times more likely to be wrongly convicted. And so if you're white and you're rich especially, it's so much more likely for you to get away with it. Especially if it's like a...
Same if you're black and rich. I feel like if you're black and like O.J. Simpson, like
Congrats, you've named one person.
can you name a white person who got away with murder besides like one of the Clintons?
Okay, that's funny. John McAfee got away with it. It was funny, but he did it while on coke and in Belize. But,
Wait, guys, I think we gotta have to agree to disagree
Yep.
on
I'm
terms
this
of.
conversation.
Let's go to a new statement. Yeah. That was good though. That was good.
I was like, shut up.
that is funny.
That's funny, bro.
Drunk driving and killed a girl and then woke up the next morning and reported it to the police.
All right, guys. Now, I'm gonna read my final statement, and I want you guys to, basically a closing statement, and for you guys to agree and disagree with. And basically, at the end, once everybody comes together, we're gonna try to come up with a consensus.
Yeah.
And we may have to agree to disagree, but I mean, let's just try
Yeah.
as best as we can, right? So, you probably thought this was coming. I think solitary confinement is a viable option as punishment for everyone.
What does for everyone mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, what?
Confinement is a viable
For any person,
Any person.
any person.
Any person.
For any crime. Or no, not any crime, but any, it's like if you commit
Any
crimes.
person.
So like anyone in prison.
So, well, then that would reverse it. Then I'd
You
have
can
to.
put
I
theirs.
don't really know what you mean.
Like a viable punishment for any crime?
No.
I think that, like,
Just
It
for
is
the
a
population.
viable
for
punishment.
the people in prison, it's a viable punishment. Can
Yes.
we go first?
yes.
Okay.
For
No,
everyone that's in a
let's-
prison right now,
Yep.
solitary confinement is like
Can
available.
I get first? I just said
No.
No.
Wait.
Agree, guys.
If the punishment fits the crime, it should be.
Yeah.
Yes,
Can I go
exactly.
first?
No, wait.
Well, can we? Let's just do the circle first.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So I think we can all agree on this one. People have to be held responsible for their actions.
I agree.
And if people know what's going to happen when they do certain things, one, they are more likely to not do it. And two, when they do end up doing it, they have to pay or they have to be held responsible for those actions. So that in the future, they won't do this, or that people surrounding them will look at that punishment and say, I don't want this, so I'm not going to do that.
At the same time, it's entirely possible that it's not an effective punishment,
Yeah.
then it stops being a matter of the person, it starts becoming a matter of the safety and well-being of the people around that person.
Yeah,
Because at that point, you have to remove them from the population so that everybody else is safe, so that everybody else
for
is
sure.
well, and that will come at the cost of the safety and health of that individual, and that's a trade that you have to make.
Oh, without a doubt, I think there's no other really viable punishments for like harsh offenses or offenses in general, besides, I guess, taking away yard time, but that's really not that severe. So
And I think we're confusing whether it's an option and whether it's a good option per case.
Oh yeah.
I think it definitely is an option for severe or for crimes that warrant the punishment.
yeah, no, exactly.
But there are also a bunch of things that just don't need to.
That don't warrant.
Yeah.
warrant.
No, but back to that question is.
I think the question is time, really.
No,
And who's making what? Who's making the decision?
Who's making the
who
call?
goes?
Yeah, but
And that's not the issue of whether this is a good thing
Yeah.
or whether it's a thing that needs to happen. It's an issue of the people in power determining who or when.
that's more logistical. Like that's logistics and hierarchy stuff. Is he writing something?
Yeah. Okay. So anybody.
Wait.
Oh,
All
is
right.
he saying hurry?
Wait. Look,
you
hold on.
Hurry it up.
Rat.
All right, wait.
Oh, rat.
All right, wait.
Hoorah. Already.
All right, all right, I'm gonna just cut off your statement when I'm editing. Guys, hop in.
Okay. Come in.
Can I talk? Thanks. Okay.
Wait, get in. You gotta get in. You gotta get in.
I really don't think.
You really thought that you were gonna get.
Okay.
Yep. Hold on. This is a more important part, so I'm gonna walk around with the camera.
Are you gonna like zoom in on my face?
No, I won't zoom in.
Yeah, get really close. All right.
All right.
It's gonna be a macro shot.
No. Why are you doing this?
So Jada,
Okay,
tell us why not.
so I agree with most of your statements, most all of your statements, but I think one big thing that we're not considering is there are specific groups of people who I think just should not, on a basis, be sent to solitary confinement, and I think that one of the qualifiers is if you're younger than 18 or legally considered a child in America, because it's proven that solitary confinement does some
Yeah, you can say.
freaking bad stuff to your brain especially if you're a kid, and it can leave some much more so than adults, some lasting impacts and some lasting mental scars that just completely harm someone's brain. And also, furthermore, if I add on to that, it also solitary confinement has proven to that it doesn't work, and more people in solitary confinement actually get reincarcerated than people in the general population. So I just don't think it would help juveniles in any way. And also, I don't think people who have pre-existing mental illnesses should be able to go to solitary confinement, because it would be so damaging for them, and it would just anything that they do have at the moment would just completely spiral out of control. And just, yeah.
But how do we determine what mental illnesses are?
I think you could have a psychiatrist diagnose it.
Yeah. Psychiatrists in the prison system would be. Yeah, you'd have to assume that with the funding that prisons have,
Well, there are prison psychiatrists.
there are prison psychiatrists in college that they're not that great.
I mean, they might not be good, but I think at least there's a qualifier for, even if they're not that good, just being able to determine that.
So you're saying people who have anxiety should not be put into solitary confinement? Is that what you're saying? Or is there a certain level of?
Yes. I think like a clinically diagnosable.
Like a case by case.
Yeah, like a
definitely
clinically
cases.
diagnosable one.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think
But
that. Sorry, go ahead.
With the children thing, kids who are under 18, I see where you're coming from, but I have to say that there are some cases that kids need to, or even though they're kids, they have to be treated like adults for things that they do or they have to be treated like adults when they act like adults.
You need repercussion.
So that's where you have children. That's where you have minors tried as adults and then sentenced as adults.
Yo, okay, yeah, there are also I do agree with there are a specific occasions where, for example, when kids are, this is some fantastic videography.
Thank you.
Incredible.
I'm sorry. I'm professional.
Off to the side.
When I think for juveniles or minors, the only case when they should be able to is when they actually are tried as an adult and in their initial trial, not necessarily something they do in prison, because, yeah.
Yeah. I just have a question. You brought up how solitary doesn't really work, but considering since causation really doesn't equal correlation doesn't equal causation, if the people who go into solitary, considering they are some of the more dangerous members of the prison population, wouldn't it only make sense that they would have a higher rate of relapse into the prison system? And what would work as a punishment per se?
I guess perhaps they would have a higher likelihood of being violent or something like that. But however, I do think that solitary confinement kind of just destroys the person's ability to rehabilitate back in the actual world, especially for extended periods of time. And also, it literally, what was I gonna say? No, but for how proportionally high the amount of people who are sent to solitary who end up not being able to rehabilitate into society and committing more crimes is kind of disproportionate from what you'd expect. And also, it's because of I think many people believe this is because of a developing psychosis or just some really some mental illnesses that do develop during solitary confinement or that increase. For example, schizophrenia and yeah.
So, so this is another hypothetical. What if this, there's a case where this person can't be reintroduced to society and, just can't be rehabilitated and is dangerous in the prison?
Do you mean can't by
What do you
can't
mean
be
by can't be
introduced?
rehabilitated?
Do you mean
Like
like
they won't be going
life
back out.
sentence?
Exactly. He won't be able to go back into society.
Like they have a
He's-
life sentence.
What
Yeah.
mean-
Well, no. He's like
Mentally
as a
broken.
person.
Mentally?
Yep. Or,
Okay,
and
that
like
means-
for example, a serial killer. Like
Someone that
wouldn't
will
they
not
get a-
be being reintroduced to the
Wouldn't they get a
general
life
civilian
sentence
population.
anyways?
Why will they?
Yeah,
I'm
can
confused
they be
why
put
would they
into-
won't? Is it because they're in a life
horrible
sentence?
Yeah.
So like life.
So they're in a life
Oh, I don't
sentence.
think you should have
Essentially.
solitary for life.
Life
No,
sentence
no.
or
I would
die.
rather die.
Wait, hold on.
Yeah, literally.
Wait, let me-
Let him finish.
Okay.
So say it's like a serial killer, right? And he will kill prisoners in his maximum security prison, like when he's let out. Should solitary confinement be an option for him?
Absolutely.
No.
So should the death penalty.
Oh, well, we're not going to get into the death
Yeah,
penalty.
that's a whole nother.
That's a different debate.
We don't want to talk about. I don't think so.
I think something important to consider is like, what is the purpose of prisons? Like, are we trying to get them reintroduced back into society, or are we just trying to keep them away from society and isolate them? Because like, if this serial killer has like a mental illness that is stopping him from being rehabilitated, send him to a mental hospital institution, like whatever.
But how
Like-
do we make? But the question there is, how do we make sure the people, other people surrounding them, are safe?
I think we just need better security. If a prisoner is managing to find a way to kill someone,
There's
regardless of
something
like,
wrong with the system.
regardless of how like severe their crime was, like I think there's just something wrong with the actual security.
You're describing the rationale for solitary confinement.
Yeah.
If a prisoner is too dangerous and is able to
I
kill
just-
someone, you need to do something.
No, I just don't think if like, how are they able to kill someone? Like, is
With
there
their
no
hands,
one
you can
watching?
you can kill somebody with your hands because
Because
they're
they're
But
looking
how
at
are
you.
they like getting like? How are they able to like get to that prisoner without anybody else watching?
And there's like,
Well, but
What do you
he,
think?
well, he
of
just gave us a
specifics
case by case.
There's
though,
a
so I
lot
don't
of
really know,
specifics
like, how
for serial killers because like a lot of serial killers they have like specific types and like specific
I
like
think this is
fantasies and
this is a
specific-
for example, not.
I
a
don't know if
very
serial killers is the
restrictive
best
thing.
example, to be honest.
Yeah, I think it's a good question though. Like, I don't know. I feel like I'm gonna give it the same rationale. Like, should you be able to torture people that like are in prison for life or about to have like the death penalty? Like, I really don't think you should. Yeah, I agree. I don't think you should. I think you should still treat them as human, even if they aren't going to be reintroduced into the general civilian population. So I think the same criteria should be, or the same standards should be upheld.
Yeah.
And also, I don't think they should be held in solitary confinement for the rest of their sentence.
Exactly. I think a more isolated wing maybe, where they're around like where they're higher security, for example.
And with people who deserve that caliber of
Exactly.
security.
Yeah, exactly.
Like people who committed crimes like themselves, where if they do commit that, like if they do wind up becoming violent towards these other people, it's not against anybody who would have a shot at rehabilitation. So quite frankly, you're not going to become somebody who may have a chance at becoming a person.
Yeah,
In
that's
theory,
okay.
in theory,
It's
yeah.
Becoming
That's
a
hard.
person.
Like if you have done this, I'm sorry, you've lost. I think that you have lost.
You've
the
lost
right
your
to act.
rights.
You have
You've
lost
lost your rights when
But
you're
when you're in prison, you've already lost your rights.
Yeah,
When you're in
exactly.
when you're in prison like that,
Wait,
you
when
have lost your
when
humanity.
When you're in
When you're in
prison,
prison, you've
general,
lost your rights?
When you're in prison, like you lose a lot of your rights. Yes,
A
you lose-
lot, but not all.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
of course, a
Yeah,
lot.
okay,
That's
okay.
that's a distinction. Yeah,
I
but
think-
like when you
yeah.
if you're committing a crime of this caliber, you've sacrificed your humanity along with that, and I think that you can.
But this is not to say
I-
that no one would help them. I think in your, I think you're
Yeah,
saying
yeah,
no
yeah.
one's not going to help them.
I just think, yeah, with our focus on solitary confinement, we have to focus, I think we need to focus more on rehabilitation, not even just for like mental illness, but because like, even if you look behind, like there's some people who are just, like, I don't know, I think we always like to put the blame on someone or something specific, when just like as a whole, there's so many other factors that like contribute to someone committing a crime, like environmental or even like chemical like reasons that could have contributed to it. So there's a number of different things that you could necessarily find the blame for. So I think just like putting such a harsh punishment on someone is just unreasonable because there's so many factors that we cannot judge.
There are factors, but that can't cloud.
Yeah, no.
our-
Yeah.
Given, I think there are factors, but everyone should be treated as equal in the
Yeah, I
justice
concur.
system. And those factors should not come, they should be judged on what they did.
But they're not treated
judged
equally.
equally.
We can't
They
lie.
should, like,
But
what
they
will
should
be.
get into that.
Like
They
that's
should
that's
be. They should
idealistic.
be.
Yeah.
I
You
do.
should be, but
Yes, they should be.
But these are like that's like
Should we get
800 years
pizza?
old. Yeah.
All right.
What happened to your
Well,
laces?
Thank you for discussing with me here today. All right.
Thank
Sounds
you,
good.
Julia.
I think it's